Senate Majority Leader Mike Bishop, thank you for taking the time to talk to everybody at Right Michigan here. First things first, I was hoping you'd address something that really sort of bothers conservatives and pro-growth voters across the state right now, the perception that we have a Lansing-centric problem, we have a budget problem, we have a problem with tax revenues, when in fact it's something different, it's something out-of-state, it's something related to jobs and economic growth. Could you address what that problem really is, and how do you think we're going to overcome that? How do you think we're going to grow?
Well, what we have is not a Lansing-based problem. It's a problem that we have with our economy. Our economy has steadily gone south over the past 7 years. That's due primarily to the loss of the manufacturing sector of our economy, and the fact that we have not been able to adapt to any new forms of our economy. We haven't been able to diversify, and that's a real problem. And I would tell you that the issues that you see in Lansing are not consistent with other states. Other states are seeing huge growth. Other state governments are seeing huge surpluses being built. And Lansing economic budget issues are the direct result of the state economy not performing, because our budget is based on the revenues we collect. And when the economy is in a slump, the state government will be in a slump. Unfortunately, in this state, we've been in a slump for the past 7 years. We're the only state in the union that's lost jobs for 7 straight years. And that's worse than the Great Depression. This is a real problem, but we are in a one-state recession, and other states are doing just fine. I think our responsibility to the citizens of this state is to position Michigan so that we become more competitive with the rest of the states, and we just have not learned how to do that yet.
And what you hear coming out of Lansing is you hear two trains of thought. You hear folks talking about reform, you hear folks talking about tax increases. And there was a report in MERS earlier this week, the Lansing Insider publication, of course, that said some folks on the left, some folks in the Democrat caucus are now even balking at the idea of real reforms. Now, can we experience that growth if we don't have those sorts of reforms? What are your thoughts on reforms? What are your thoughts on taxes, these tax increases that are being pushed by the governor from her State of the State address to every proposal since?
The Republican Senate has routinely stood up to the governor and said no to her solution. And her solution is really one-dimensional, and that is just to increase taxes to keep up with expenditures. We can't afford to do that. We've been doing that in this state for too long. Our responsibility in the Senate is to stand up against that solution and also present another idea, which is to reform government, to find a way to live within our means. And we have advanced significant reforms that represent real savings in government. We have advanced real cuts that are not just one-time fixes. These are cuts that continue to cut year after year after year. And we have presented 3 balanced budgets in the 2007 process, none of which were acted upon by our colleagues in the House, the Democrats in the House. The governor was adamantly opposed to them. And the reforms that they've put forward so far have not been the kind of reforms that are going to represent real savings for the future. It's kind of window dressing. They're dancing around the real issues. And I think that we will get to the point where we'll have a discussion, because the governor knows she cannot get any kind of tax discussion in the Senate without first showing a good faith effort to address the real reforms and real cuts.
Now, what do you think has been the biggest obstacle to this point to enacting those reforms? I mean, from privatization of services locally to MESA, the teacher health insurance thing. I mean, the list could go on and on of potential reforms, and yet they're not being acted on. What's been the biggest obstacle thus far?
Well, the biggest obstacle is we have a culture in this state, an entitlement culture, and we're afraid to take it on. There are sectors of our political parties that will not take on certain interest groups. And if you can't take on interest groups, you cannot have real reforms. I was saying earlier, and I continue to say, that we need to have an open discussion with our organized labor in this state. I don't care what union it is, we need to have a discussion about it. We need to discuss our differences and figure out how we can have a more attractive workforce and working environment in this state so that we can be competitive worldwide. If the outside world continues to believe that it's a combative environment here in Michigan, we're never going to attract new business. So we have to have that open dialogue, and we can't go on just ignoring the problem. There are real problems out there. We cannot allow any of our political parties to be bought and sold by interest groups.
Now, it's after 8 o'clock right now on a Thursday night. You're in Grand Rapids. You don't live in Grand Rapids. You live on the other side of the state. You work in Lansing. We get caught up sometimes in all the minutia and everything that's going on in Lansing and focusing on your job and what you guys are doing. What's this process been like for you personally, on a human level, on a family level? I mean, you're a husband, you're a father. How is that affecting you?
Well, the past year has been quite a tour of duty, one that I will not soon forget, and I know my family won't either. I'm blessed to have a family that's very understanding. My wife gets all the credit for being the mother that she is. We have 3 young kids, but I make a concerted effort every night to go home, to be with my family. I in the years that I've spent in the legislature, can count on my fingers how many times I've actually stayed overnight in the Capitol Loop. I drive an hour and a half each way too, but I do it because my family's first. That's my number one priority, and I always stay grounded. And you can't let this whole process suck you in, so you lose your grounding and you lose your objectivity on what's really important.
I wanted to address, since we run a blog, we do the rightmichigan.com. It is a community-based web blog. We've got bloggers from all over the state that contribute every day. We've been hitting the phones, we've been hitting the email. I know your office has received a bunch of calls over the last couple of days. And last month, a couple of supposedly fiscally conservative members of the House caucus, the House Republican caucus, they were talking in the press and behind semi-closed doors about supporting a Democrat tax hike with a couple of reforms attached. And we sent out an action alert. We pounded the phones, pounded the email, and lo and behold, now that list from 5 or 6 is down to 2 or 3, and some have come around and said, yeah, we're not going to support a tax hike. So the blogging community, the Netroots community, even though it's in its infancy on the conservative side, the Democrats have done it well for years, but it's starting to have an impact. It's starting to be heard. Now, are blogs something that you follow, something that you're aware of in your office? Is the Senate aware of it? Do you guys pay attention to them? How important do you think they are? I mean, what are your thoughts over on the Netroots and where we go forward from here?
We pay attention to it, and in an informational world, you have to pay attention to that kind of thing. We are very technology-based in the Senate. In the legislature, we read our email. We all have, most of us have websites. We participate in the blogging process. Both of our caucuses participate in the blogging process. We understand it, we appreciate it, it's very effective. And I think with the amount of communication, the kind of information out there now, people can go anywhere on the internet now and find out information that they never would have had before. And if you're good at it, you can really get a lot of great information. It's helpful for us as legislators because we need our constituents to be educated on issues so that we can participate in an open dialogue with them.
Yeah, and I recognize that you're a very busy guy. You're leading the caucus, and so you probably don't have time necessarily yourself to blog, but you're always welcome at rightmichigan.com. If you're interested in blogging, you're welcome to submit something yourself. But while we've got the opportunity here, if there's any sort of message in particular, anything you'd like to say to the Netroots, to the conservative activists, the community that's paying attention to these blogs and paying attention to what's going on in Lansing and the role that you've played sticking up for conservative principles in Lansing. If there's any sort of message that you wanted to relay to them, I'd love to give you the opportunity here, and I know people are interested to hear what you've got to say.
Right. Well, I would just say continue to participate, and if there is any opportunity to interject your thoughts on any part of the process, that those that are listening and those that blog or whatever you do to participate, that you continue to do that you understand that members of the legislature listen to that communication, they listen and they watch the blogs. It's part of our everyday conversation, so I know that people are listening. But now more than ever, we need people to be involved in this process. Our state is at a turning point, and it really is a defining moment for us. As conservatives, though, we need to stand up for more than just no on things. We've got to really stand up for a solution, and we've got to not be an obstruction in the process. So, I encourage people to be out there fighting for what they believe in, but at the same time, we need to let people know that we have a solution too, and we've got to be talking about reforms. We've got to be talking about changing the culture in Lansing, and making sure that those out there who we oftentimes call our adversaries understand that we're working with them towards a final outcome, which is a solution to our state's budget crisis. We all have different ideas how to get there, but we need to make our voices heard, and we need to be solution driven.
Senate Majority Leader Mike Bishop, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.